So gone through, done my edit, still got the sound to tidy up, put in some dissolves, put in some titles. So what next? Well, next thing, looking at this shot here, I wobble on quite a bit. I don't think I need the middle sentence of what I'm saying here. I think I talk too much.
Stuff these days. As long as you've got an up-to-date computer and the right editing program, you just put it into the program and edit it. I mean, we used to tell people they'd have to...
I don't like that middle sentence. I want to get rid of it. I'm going to do exactly what I did when I was going to these joins. Mark an endpoint, that's where I want to start getting rid of stuff. Mark an endpoint, that's where I want to end getting rid of stuff. Press delete, it's gone.
Stuff these days. I mean, we used to...
Now if you close your eyes, you can't tell that I've cut anything out. But you can obviously see visually. Traditional way of sorting that out is just to put a cutaway to something else. The obvious things I've got is either a wide shot or a close-up. And if you remember earlier when I was looking at Ringo, I made a little marker, which you can see there, where he just flips his eyes up. I can use that to cover the join. So I'm going to mark an in point just before it, an out point just after it, and I'm going to put that over the join. So just grab it and drop it. And now when you play it...
Well, it's pretty easy to edit the stuff these days. I mean, we used to tell people they'd have to...
Okay, well I can't see a join there. Of course, I've brought the sound in. I wish I hadn't brought that sound in. The obvious thing to do would be to either turn off the link icon and select it and then get rid of it. If the link icon is on, hold down an Alt and select it and then get rid of it. And normally I would press the delete key. But of course, as I mentioned earlier, that then ripple deletes chunks of the timeline.
Well, it's pretty easy. I mean, we used to tell...
So I didn't want to do that. Let's undo it, Alt select it again, and then press the backspace key, just to get rid of the sound that came in at the same time.
Edit the stuff these days. I mean, we used to tell people they'd have to convert it.
Yep, that's nicely covered it up. You can even do that a bit quicker. So if I delete that one again, select it backspace, not delete, I could come up here and say, I just want to drag the picture and not the sound. You notice once I pop up here, I get these two little icons, a picture and a sound icon. If I grab hold of that and drag, it just does the picture and not the sound. That's quicker, obviously, than dumping it down there and then deleting the sound. Alternatively, you could use a keyboard shortcut or drag it onto here to overlay it. Now, if you're using a keyboard shortcut or anything, you've got to be very careful where these things are. I don't want it to go on the V1 track. I want it to go on V2, so I drag that up there. And if I don't want the sound, I just click on that and make sure that there is no sound with an orange line around it. If you got it set like that, when you use a keyboard shortcut or a draggy thing, then it doesn't bring in the sound, it just brings in the picture. And I could just click on the overwrite button and it will put it up there. Or I could drag this thing up here and say overwrite. The nice thing actually is if you haven't set the track patch, so the track patch, the orange thing is still down there, what you can do is you can drag it over to here and say place on top, and it puts it on top automatically. So all of those all achieve exactly the same thing. Resolve does have another way of getting around this, so I want to show you that. I'd actually prefer my noddy, my traditional way of doing things. So I'm not going to get rid of it because I'm going to want to bring it back later on. So what I'm going to do is temporarily disable it so I can see that join again. To disable something, the easiest thing is select it and press D. That is now there, but you can't see it. Just so I can show you the other way that Resolve has of getting around this kind of jump. It's a transition. So up here, I've only had the media pool, which is effectively the project window, open. I've got other things here, and I'm going to go to Effects. And under Effects, I'm going to look for Transitions, and then this thing, Smooth Cut. It's what they call a morph cut in Premiere. Drag that, drop it onto the clip. So I've not put a transition on before, but any transition you want to do, you just drag it and drop it where you want to put it. If I wanted it to start at the start of the second clip, I put it there. If I want it to straddle both clips, I whack it there. And that's put on a 1 second dissolve. Now what does a smooth cut do? If we play it, it does more than a crossfade. If I was just to use a crossfade, drag that on instead.
Stuff these days. I mean, we used to tell people...
That's what a crossfade does. Because my head's moving, so it's just fading between the two. Obviously, that's no use whatsoever. A smooth cut does a fancy more. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I do still get a bit of odd stuff where it can't quite work out what's going on, but it is smoother. With these things, I actually find they work better if you make them smaller. So to make it smaller, let's zoom in, Alt and mouse wheel, grab hold of the ends and drag it and make it shorter and see if it works. And that's almost not seeable. Maybe if I make it really, really small. Yeah, there you see, I probably wouldn't notice. I still prefer my noddy, but that's a way of doing it. There are options to do with this smooth cut, which you get to by looking at the inspector. The inspector is kind of like the effects control window in Premiere or any effects palette in any other program. So if I click on the inspector with the headings over here, it brings up something which gives me stuff I can do with whatever it is I've got selected. So suppose it's this clip here. I can pick it up, move it around, and I can change the speed of it and all sorts of stuff. On the audio, I can change the volume and the panning and lots of stuff. I can put effects on it. If I select the transition, it tells me stuff I could do with that transition. I could change it to another type of transition if I didn't like that. I can also change it by dragging one over the top, but I could change it here. You've got the duration, which is how many frames, whether it ends at the first clip, straddles the two of them, or starts at the next clip. I had it straddling them. And then you always have some different kinds of options. You've got two quality modes, faster or better, normally like better myself, and this easing, which is sort of how quickly it changes from one to the other. The simplest thing with any of this is just to try these things and see what it looks like. Now this is an effect, so if you're lucky, your computer can play it back. Now, how well it plays it back, with Resolve, most of it's down to what the graphics card is you have in your system. In this system here, I have got an NVIDIA 3060, which is a really nice, quite up-to-date graphics card. That can do quite a lot of stuff. The better your graphics card with Resolve, the more effects you can do. This system setting here, I'd never bother to fiddle with this at all, so I'd always leave it as it is. If you've got the studio version of Resolve, you can actually have two graphics cards and you can do all sorts of things with them that you can't with one. That graphics card is doing pretty much all the work inside of Resolve. Some of it's done on the processor, but most of it's done by the graphics card. If your graphics card is good enough, it's going to play that effect. Now you'll have noticed as I was showing it off that sometimes when I press the play button, there was a bit of a hesitation, just like that. Sometimes it plays it, because it's trying to do it on the fly. Really, I want to see that properly. I want to know whether it's worked. Like if I make it a bit bigger, has it worked? Is that hesitation the fact that it's not keeping up with it, or is it not working properly? Well, for a start, when it's playing back, I can look up here. Let's just press the play button. And you can see the number of frames it's playing back. So I've got a 50 frames a second timeline. It's playing at 50 frames a second. So yeah, it is playing it at the normal speed. A lot of the time I look up there and I see it's playing a lot lower, and that's why it's stuttering. So maybe, yeah, maybe that is what it looks like. So in my system, that is playing back. If it isn't, you have to render it. Now inside of Resolve, rendering is called caching. To get it going, come up to playback and render cache, and you can see here you've got three options: none, smart, and user. I tend to leave it on smart. That's because I've got a quite nice computer and it can cope with it. What I have had, say if I'm using a laptop which doesn't have a great graphics card in it, is sometimes if I leave it on smart, it will keel over halfway through and complain that it can't keep up. Smart is basically it'll render stuff in the background. So if I put that on there and it says this is something here that needs to be made up, it'll do it whilst you carry on working. So it's doing two things at once and it does it itself. That's the smart part of it. You might notice here it went red and then a bit of it's gone blue and now the whole thing's gone blue. So red is, oh, this is a bit that needs to render. Blue is, it's rendered. So now it's rendered, I should be able to play it properly.
You edit the stuff these days. I mean, we used to tell.
And yet there's a slight thing going on my eye, but probably good enough. If I want to see it's like making it smaller, change it a bit. Goes red again. You have to wait for it to go blue and then you can play it back. Sometimes if you play it, it actually kickstarts it into working, sometimes it doesn't. But having the render cache going is nice because now you know it's playing properly rather than it trying to do it in real time. The options are none, obviously it doesn't render anything, smart, and user. So if you put it on user, then it's not going to do anything in the background. It's going to only render stuff that you tell it to. On the transition here, I don't have the option for telling it to start going on that. So I can't get it to specifically render that. I could get it to render this if I had some color effects on it, or if I used Fusion, which is their fancy compositing bit, I could do that. But telling it to render this one, actually quite hard. That's why I quite like to leave it on to smart, but like I said, the only trouble is that sometimes if your computer's not quite up to it, then the fact that it's rendering stuff in the background can cause you slight playback problems. What it gets rendered as, so it's choosing some kind of format, is all decided in your master settings. So it's down to the cog down here in the bottom right. And here you can see you've got things like formats of proxies, but this one here, the render cache format. Again, I tend to leave it at the defaults, which on this case is this DNxHRHQ, which is an Avid format. A lot of other things won't actually read that. If you're on a Mac, you'll have ProRes, which I would quite like to use, but you don't have that on a PC. And you've only got all these other things, and I tend to leave it on the Avid one rather than any of these others. Where the render files are going is down here, but I'd already set my D-Resolve folder, and you can tell it's going down there. And if you look at that, I've now got a couple of folders, and in those folders I've got some stuff, and I've got some other stuff, and these are my renders. I never fiddle with this stuff beyond coming in here, and maybe if it's got quite big, if I have a look at the size of that, I've only been going for a while, it's already up to 40 meg. If it's got quite big, I might actually just plain delete that and then come back into Resolve, and it's lost stuff like the renders, but it can do it again. Now you notice here, my smooth cut for some reason has media offline. That's because I've gone ahead and deleted the rendered files. It still thinks it's rendered, but I've deleted them outside of Resolve and it doesn't know why it's got that. Now probably coming out of Resolve and going back in again would sort it. You could tweak it, that'll sort it out. Or you could select the two clips, come up to playback and delete render cache and say let's delete the render cache of the selected clips. In other words, the two I've got selected. You really want to do it? Oh yes please. And yep, it's done it and redone the effect. Getting a little bit more involved on rendering, but you will do rendering at some point. As long as your machine's up to it, I would generally say leave it on smart and let it get on with it. Anyway, this particular shot, I don't want to use the smooth cut, I want to use the noddy, which is the traditional way of doing it before we had fancy smooth cuts. So I'm going to select that smooth cut, backspace to delete it, select Ringo, D, which is what I use to disable it, puts it back on again, and now I've got Ringo back. So the sound is the next thing. What do I do about the sound? In particular at the start, I have got all this surround sound stuff. Now, I can't see it all, so what I want to do is to make the audio a bit bigger and the video a bit smaller. So the easiest way of doing that is to grab the join between the two and then move it up. And I still can't see it all, so maybe I'll come to this little thingy and make my audio a bit thinner. And yeah, okay, I've got this audio here, but I've also got all this stuff and I don't really want them. Because this is surround sound, what I've got is left speaker, right speaker, center speaker, back left, back right, and subwoofer. Do I really want any of that? No, I only need one of them. I could just select all the ones I don't want and get rid of them. Now, because these are all linked together, I'm selecting them and obviously it's selecting everything. So this is another case of hold down on Alt, select them, and then backspace to get rid of them. And that kind of sorts it out. Suppose I'd actually wanted to keep some of them. I would have selected them, got rid of the ones I don't want, kept the one I do want, but I still have to worry about the fact that I've now got David in there twice. So I'd have to, again, trim this one back to about there. Oh, they're linked, so Alt, trim. There we are. So I've got those two sounds in there. That's if I wanted to keep one or two of them.
Hi, David.
But in this case, probably I just want to dump everything apart from the one on the main track. So that's tidied those up. Now, of course, I've got a lot of extra tracks here. It's a bit of a mess. Maybe I don't want them. Actually, there's a really, really nice thing in Resolve, which I like. So you can right click on here and say delete empty tracks, and it gets rid of anything that doesn't have anything on it. Makes it look tidier. So that's got that sorted out. And in fact, it's kind of ready to go. That's about all I need to do with the sound. In terms of levels, well, actually, because I've got a directional microphone, which is right next to the speakers, it all sounds pretty good. This bit at the start,
David,
might be a bit quiet.
Hi, David.
So maybe I want to make that a bit louder. Loads of ways of doing that, but the simplest way is there's a little rubber band there and you can drag it and it will make it louder or quieter. If you make this bigger, you can get a bit more refined on it. Obviously, if I do that, then it's whacked up right into the top. That's going to be distorting. Let's see what it sounds like. Yep. That doesn't like it. It's gone far too red. So obviously that's not a good thing. I mean, that's a David. These should be roughly the same size. So let's make them roughly the same size.
Hi. David, I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, that sounds okay. I did that by dragging up this, but you can achieve the same thing by selecting it and coming over to the inspector. And if the inspector's not on, you just press the inspector button. And I can change this slider here, which changes where that line is. Doing either of those works. This will change it all the way through. If I wanted to put, say, something like a ramp on there, then I'd need to put a couple of points in. Now, looking at the inspector up here, there's a little full stop there. That will put in a point. So suppose I said there, I want it to be at 4.2. I can click on that and put a point in. If I wanted to be a bit quieter earlier on, I can then go along, put another point in, and drag it downwards a bit. I like the way Resolve changes the waveform to match what it sounds like.
Hi.
So effectively it's a bit quieter, then it gets louder.
David, I wanted to ask you about ADCHD.
These little dots here, these are creating keyframes, and if you're doing anything with picture, sound, whatever, this is how you do it. You stick the keyframes in and you'd adjust something. You can jump between keyframes by using this. So that's taken me back to that keyframe, then back to that one, or forward. And if you don't like a keyframe when you're on it, if you click on the little dot, you notice it's orange when you're actually on the keyframe. Click on the little dot, the keyframe goes away. This is a reset button, so if I click on that, it resets it back to no keyframes whatsoever. So there's various ways there of playing with the sound level yourself. You can also get Resolve to automatically set the sound levels by right-clicking on it and choosing Normalize. You've got lots of different options. I don't really have time to go through them all now. I'm just going to go to that, click Normalize, and let it work it out. So it's gone through and it's actually decided to go to that level of normalization, to that -9. It's actually got to get a bit quieter. Let's go to these ones here. What does it think if I actually normalize that? Well, they have to get quite a lot quieter. And -9 is sort of about here on the scale, and they're all going up a bit higher. And maybe that's what you need. Maybe you need to make sure that everything only peaks at a certain level. Well, then you could do that with your normalize. You could actually just select the lot, right click and normalize. And it goes through and looks at the lot and adjusts the volume of all of them so it peaks at 9. I mean, literally, it's just changing the volume. It's not doing anything fancy. It's not a compressor making the loud bits quieter and the quiet bits louder. It is basically just changing the volume of the lot. In this case, I don't want to do that, so I could just undo it, or I could go to a particular clip and then press the reset button. And now I've got to go through that and do it with all of them. Well, I could select all of them and then press the reset button, and it resets the lot. Or if I had a particular clip that I wanted everything to have those levels, well, I could just select it, Control-C to copy it, and then select all of them and use a thing called Paste Attributes, which you'll find in pretty much all editing programs. Right-click, Paste Attributes. These are all the different things that I could paste, so it's all to do with videos and audios. I want to go to the audio and paste, not the effects, just the volume. Please, Bosch, go through and changes the volume on all of the clips so that they're all now at -1.4. Again, I'm just going to select the lot and reset. And then come to the first one and then up it slightly. Now there is a lot more that you can do with audio. So if you go to the list of effects for a start, there's a whole lot of audio effects that you can apply to clips. It's got a bunch of effects built in, Fairlight effects, and you can take VST plugins. The effects can be applied to the clip or to the track. Now, obviously it has got Fairlight. Fairlight is a really fancy audio editing program that was integrated into Resolve, and you can do a lot of things with it. There's a lot of things to do with buses and EQ, and you can do ADR in this, so you can re-record dialogue, you can do voiceovers, lots and lots of things that you can do with this, and it does better stretching of the audio, lots of things which are basically better than you can do in the edit page, but you don't need to know it. You don't need to use it to actually do an edit. So I'm not going to do anything at all in Fairlight, and I'm just going to be concentrating on doing stuff in the edit page. In the edit page, you can do simple things like just take effects and drag them onto clips. Now I've just put an echo on there.
David, I wanted to ask you about ADCHD. How easy is it to...
It brings up a dialog box where you can change all sorts of things. Let's choose a preset from the drop down up here.
I wanted to ask you about ADCHD. How easy is it to...
And that just affects that particular clip. If I want to adjust things on that later, I just pop up to the inspector, make sure the clip is selected, and here you can see for this particular clip I've got stuff to do video, stuff to do with audio. So there is a bunch of things already on the clip. Every audio clip has got all these things, so you can set the panning, set the volume, set the pitch, set the equalizer, and so on. But on this particular clip I have got an effect as well. So you notice if I click on that one, effects is grayed out. Click on that one, it's got an effect on it. And if I go to the effects section, here you can adjust all the parameters to do with that particular effect. So I could change, how big the echo is, how much
I
feedback
wanted to
there
ask you about ABCHD. How easy is
If you want to get back to that main dialogue that I saw when it opened up, you can just click on this button and it will bring up dialogue for you. So I can adjust it in there as opposed to here. So I can quite happily put an effect on one particular clip. You'll also notice there's a little FX badge down there which says it's got an effect on. Don't really want that echo, so I'm going to take it off by just clicking on that rubbish bin. On the first clip, that microphone's quite a bit of hiss on there. It might be nice to put a bit of noise reduction on it. So if I grab hold of the noise reduction effect and pop it on there, it brings up this little dialog box, and I could just try auto speech mode and see what happens.
Hi. Hi. David.
And that's not bad.
Hi. Hi.
If I just disable it by clicking that little button next to the word noise reduction, this is before.
Hi. Hi. David.
And then this is after.
Hi. Hi. David.
And that's done a pretty good job there actually of cleaning that up. That's just on auto. I can go to manual. So if I go to manual, what you have to do is you have to find a bit with a bit of noise on, like that, and then click the learn button and play it. And that's learned a noise profile. And now that it's learnt it, it will take that out of the audio.
Hi. Hi. David.
And if you think, no, I want it to be a bit more sensitive, or let's go a bit lower and cut out more of the noise.
Hi. Hi. David.
And you can just fiddle with these things to see what results you get with it. Actually, the auto speech mode worked pretty well for that first clip. And again, close it down, but if I need to get back to it, I can just select the clip, go up to the effects, either use these sliders here or open up a dialog box. What's not immediately obvious from here is that you can actually apply an effect to an entire track. So let me dump the effects off here, and I'm going to put noise reduction over the entire thing. The way to do that is basically to drag the noise reduction and drop it onto the audio track. You notice a little FX button that pops up there, and the same dialog box comes up here. Let's just leave it on auto speech mode. And now play it.
Hi. Hi. David. I wanted to ask you
and I've got noise reduction going
How
through the
easy is it
whole
to-
thing. I could also add on that echo filter if I want everybody to be in a hall. Let's choose the large hall preset.
Hi. 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 David. I wanted to ask you about ABCHD. How easy is it to edit?
Again, same effect going through absolutely everything. If I want to get to that and adjust it, all I've got to do is click on the track header, and you notice the effects here now show those two effects that I've got on that track. So it is possible to put an effect on an entire track as well as on an individual clip. I have to admit, for ages with Resolve, I thought the only way of doing that was to pop into Fairlight and use some of its fancy stuff. But no, I can do it entirely in the edit page. Of course, I don't want an echo all the way through, so I'm going to remove that. I'm going to leave the noise reduction on now. I'll take the noise reduction off. There's a couple of other things worth mentioning to do with audio. Firstly, this little thing here. Mono, if you hang over it. What's that all about? This clip here was surround sound. These clips, if I go back to the original clips, so I could go to the media pool, find a clip and click on it. But another thing I can do here is go to a clip and say, I want to find that in the media pool. We'll right click on it and say, find in media pool. Then I can double click on it and shove it up here and then listen to it.
I wanted to ask you about ABCHD.
The sound is all over one side. This is because I used a directional microphone, and that's what happens. The sound all goes over one channel, not the other. But when they're on the timeline,
ABCHD. How easy is it to edit?
the sound's over both sides. How did that happen? Well, in this case, it's all down to the fact that I had mono audio tracks, which is what it defaulted to. So the mono audio track basically means if you shove something on there, take whatever it is and shove both the left and right over both speakers, which in my case works fine.
Doing it, and it would take ages, but you don't have to do that anymore.
And Sony and Panasonic cameras?
And that's why my surround sound went into 6 different audio tracks, because they all went into mono. If I change this to stereo, so the way to change it is you come over to the number, right click, and you say, change the track type to something else. And I'm going to change it to stereo. Nothing is immediately obvious that anything's changed, but when I play it back,
ABCHD. How easy is it to edit?
suddenly ring goes all over one side and not the other side. If I wanted some music, I probably want it on a stereo track. So if I was to put some music in, I would probably add in another track and make it stereo and shove the music on it. But if I wanted to have this on a stereo track, now I've got to sort out the fact that it's all over one side. So for this, probably it is easier just to leave it on plain mono, because now I don't have to do anything to get that audio over both sides. The only thing is it is taking the left and the right channel and combining them and making them mono. It's not just using the left channel, which is where the mic audio is. It's using the right channel. If there was anything else on there, sometimes you get odd bits of crackles and things on the silent track. That might be a bit naff. So maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you want to sort it out. If I keep it as mono, what I could do is go to the clip itself, right click, go to clip attributes, go to audio, and here I can decide what audio I'm using in that clip. So at the moment it thinks it's a stereo clip and it's using the left and the right. If I change this to mono, I can say make it mono and only use channel 1. Pretty sure channel 1 is the one that's got the sound on it. So let's do that. Again, not immediately obvious that anything's changed.
Invert it, there'd be lots of different ways of doing it and it would take ages, but you don't have to do that anymore.
And actually doesn't sound any different because in my case, my right channel didn't have any crap on it. But yeah, that sorted it out. If I actually went back to the clip attributes and say, oh, let's make it channel 2, suddenly it's quiet because I didn't have anything on there at all. Let's make sure it's back to channel 1.
Have to convert it, there'd be lots of different...
Now for me, I was really quite lucky that these came in as mono tracks. You might say, all my tracks on the timeline are stereo. Why was yours mono? If I make up a new timeline, you'll notice the default type of audio track is stereo. Why were mine mono? Mine were mono because the first clip I put onto the timeline was the surround sound clip, which it had decided was 6 mono tracks, so it made the timeline mono automatically. You remember it asked me that question if I want to go to 50 frames a second. It also changed the audio tracks to match what it thought the clip was. That's why all my tracks were mono. Now, if you didn't have to put a surround sound clip on there first, instead you just went ahead and used some clip like, say, this one.
I wanted to ask you about AVCHD.
Just an alternative angle compared to the one I have been using, but it's like the others, it's got a directional microphone, the sound is all over one side. So what happens when I put that down onto a stereo timeline? Goes in there, looks okay, you start playing it.
I wanted to ask you about AVCHD editing.
And it's all over one side. That would have happened on my original timeline if it hadn't automatically changed everything to mono. Now to sort that out, it's just a variation on what I've been doing already. So first of all, I could just come over here and say, no, make that track mono. That does mean that anything that goes on that track will be mono. By mono, what I mean is you'll have the same amount of sound coming out the left and the right speaker equally. So it'll take what's there and just spread it over the two of them. Anything that goes on that track will be mono. Quite happy to do that with this piece of talking, but what if it wasn't talking? What if there's something else going on there and I wanted sometimes for it to be on the left and sometimes for it to be on the right? Then maybe I would want a stereo track. So let's go back and change this to a stereo track. But now I've got the problem
AVCHD.
that this is all over one side. So how do I sort it out? Right click on it, go to clip attributes, and you might think, well, I should change it to mono then, shouldn't I? It's now mono. I'm only using channel 1. I happen to know channel 1's the one with all the sound on. Surely that's going to give me mono sound.
About AVCHD editing.
No,
How
it
easy
doesn't.
is it?
What it does is it just says, no, I'm only using one of the tracks. That's not worked. What I've actually got to do is go to clip attributes, change it back to stereo, and tell it to put channel 1 on the left and channel 1 on the right. Again, no visible representation that's happened down here. But when I play it back...
I wanted to ask you about AVCHD editing. How easy is it?
Well, it's pretty easy these days, blah-de-blah-de-blah.
Yeah, that sorted it out. If I'd had this chopped up into several bits, then I could have selected all of them, gone to the clip attributes of all of them, and changed the lot. And it would affect all the clips. So it's quite easy to sort out, you just got to know how to do it. So in my case, on my original timeline, I reckon I'm quite happy just leaving that as a mono track. Other things can be stereo, so I can put in stereo sound effects, stereo music and that kind of thing, but I'm quite happy with the voice being mono. This one here, which is the surround sound clip, you know, maybe that would be better off if I actually used a different piece of audio. So let's go to the clip attributes on that. Let's try, I don't know, channel 3. What's channel 3? Is that the center? Now I know in this case it doesn't sound much different. But you might say, no, I want to use that one because it sounds a little bit better. Obviously, if I use the wrong one of these is the subwoofer, I think it's channel 6. You get a very peculiar because that's the subwoofer channel. And you might notice here I've got a little FX icon because when I was showing you the effects, I've accidentally left the noise reduction on there. Simplest thing is go to the inspector, go to the effects and dump it. So I want to put it on everything. And obviously you can see the little link icon there, which is because those two are linked. If I was to right click on this and untick link clips, that goes away. Now it doesn't know that they're supposed to be linked. And I'm going to keep them linked because they should be. Final thing I do want to mention is just going back to the keyframes. If you remember here, I said if you drag this up and down, it changes it all the way through. If you go to the inspector, you can click on this little dot and put in keyframes. You can pick keyframes in on the timeline by holding down on the Alt key and then clicking on that little line. And then you put in some keyframes there. They are reflected in the inspector.
Hi. David.
But that's got my sound there just coming up from nothing at the start.